Ezio Serracini's 30-year quest to find the great lost masterpiece of the Renaissance, Leonardo's Battle of Anghiari, had reached its crucial stage. By a painstaking process of elimination, Rab Hatfield had narrowed down the mural's possible location. It must have been painted within a 400-square-foot area on the east wall of the Great Hall. But how might it be hidden? There was no evidence of a second protective layer of plaster on the east wall. That left just one option. The only way that Vasari could have protected the painting was by erecting a second wall just in front of it. To find out, Serracini once more turned to a technique he had used in his police work. A type of radar that could detect areas of disturbed Earth. When radar waves encounter solid objects such as walls, they produce blue images. When they pass through empty space, the images would turn red. They should pick up any anomalous spaces behind Vasari's work. Serracini trained the radar on the spot where Leonardo painted Anghiari. It picked up evidence of Vasari's solid plastered wall in blue. And then, an unmistakable line of red. The red clearly signaled a gap. At last, Serracini had found what he had been searching for. Irrefutable evidence of a secret 1-inch void behind Vasari's fresco. In the exact spot where Leonardo painted his mural. Vasari had erected a second brick wall against the east wall, and had left a gap. Serracini was convinced that Vasari could only have one possible motive: to protect Leonardo's wall painting for posterity.
Right here in the Hall de 500, right in the same area where all the other results are pointing to. I don't want to believe that it's just a coincidence. I have to accept the idea that it could be, but surely I cannot see any other reason.
Serracini was on the brink of perhaps the greatest discovery the art world had ever seen. All the evidence suggested that Leonardo's legendary lost work did indeed lie behind the east wall. Now he was anxious to prove it. To do that, he needed permission to drill a tiny hole through the Vasari fresco. Then he could insert an endoscopic camera to explore the void. The next stage of the investigation was critical. It could even ultimately lead to the removal of the east wall fresco and put reputations on the line. Serracini's time in the hall was up, and he needed to report his findings. He felt unable to produce a full report without further work, but the authorities considered the interim report he did submit to be inadequate. The impasse led to a complete breakdown in relations between the parties. All further access to the Great Hall was denied, and Serracini's plan to use a camera to explore the void was rejected.
I am stranded again. What's wrong? For the second time I was stopped. I simply had to leave everything there and move over to keep myself alive, financially speaking. That is, going back to what I was doing, studying works of art, studying other architectures, and keeping up with the work. Frustrating, to say the least, and disappointing.
Serracini had spent half his life searching for evidence that the Battle of Anghiari was not destroyed, but lay hidden somewhere in the Palazzo Vecchio. Now he was convinced he knew its exact location, but it seemed he would never get the access he needed to close the case. Serracini's dream of finding the lost Leonardo was shattered. But just as his investigation of the Battle of Anghiari ground to a halt, he was handed an even more exciting opportunity. Events unfolding elsewhere in Florence were about to draw Serracini into another great Leonardo mystery. Its outcome would change his life forever. In the Uffizi Gallery, a huge storm was raging over one of the world's most famous and iconic Leonardo paintings. The Adoration of the Magi is thought to be Leonardo's first major commission, and as one of only 15 surviving Leonardos, it's priceless. The Uffizi had decided to restore the unfinished painting, whose surface was obscured by centuries of dirt.
Era un restauro che prevedeva soltanto la rimozione.
It was a restoration that envisaged the removal of the yellowing of the paints and the removal of everything that was dirt. This would have taken away the filth, insect droppings, and the dirt combined with people's breath.
Quindi noi avremmo visto.
Therefore, we would have seen much more clearly, whilst leaving everything else as it was, the drawings or the brushstrokes of Leonardo.
Il disegno o le ripassature.
Restoration is often a controversial step. It can make a 500-year-old painting look as if it was created yesterday. So suggesting the restoration of an icon like the Adoration appalled many in the art world.
I was horrified when I learned that there was a plan to restore the Adoration of the Magi. On a practical level, the applications are so thin in Leonardo's technique that in many cases they are immeasurable. So if you can imagine that it's so delicate that even, breathing on it is dangerous.
James Beck and his New York-based organization ArtWatch did everything they could to stop the restoration.
An entire page of La Nazione, the Florence newspaper, showed a petition signed by 40 art historians from different countries against the restoration. And that was the beginning of a fight over the Adoration.
The Uffizi's answer to their critics was to announce a series of scientific tests on the masterpiece to see what the possible risks or effects of a restoration would be. Only then would they decide whether to go ahead. For the first time, Serracini's maverick reputation worked to his advantage. As an art world outsider, he had no allegiance to either the pro or anti-restoration lobbies. Just months after his devastating setback, he embarked upon the first exhaustive scientific examination of one of the world's greatest Leonardos. What he didn't know was that his work on the painting would unearth an astonishing link back to the Battle of Anghiari. The Adoration of the Magi depicts the arrival of the wise men after the birth of Jesus, a common enough subject among Renaissance artists. But Leonardo's interpretation, even though half-finished and brown with age, is seen as the work of a great innovator.
It's a classic Christian scene, the arrival of the three kings to worship and adore the Christ child. Yet his whole approach to this painting is radically innovative, radically different. It's a wonderful comment on meditation on perhaps what we would today call, trivializing it somewhat, celebrity.
The Adoration boasts another distinction, an image many believe to be a rare self-portrait of the young Leonardo, aged 29, obscured by centuries of dirt and discolored varnish. Serracini knew this was the chance of a lifetime, but he was also aware that his findings would come under more intense scrutiny than ever before. Serracini could hardly believe it. He was to spend 6 months alone with one of the world's great paintings. His first task? To conduct a routine visual examination of the physical state of the painting. But before he had a chance to examine the painting itself, he made a shocking discovery. It didn't take sophisticated equipment to see that the poplar boards on which the Adoration was painted were in a terrible state.
Looking from the back, you see the wood rotten, the lower part eaten up by worms, almost 10 centimeters being cut off in the lower part of the painting. At the top part, several chunks were cut off. So why people would do something like that to a Leonardo?
Serracini was mystified. But he quickly spotted something else. Bleaching that he had seen all too often on paintings in Florence. Evidence of water damage. In 1966, a flood overran the Arno in Florence. Water flooded the basement of the Uffizi and several churches. Some pieces of art were destroyed outright. Others are still being restored some 40 years later. The Adoration was not caught up in the flood, but it had, at some point, prolonged contact with water. So what had happened to it? The location of some of the stains along its bottom edge gave Serracini a clue.
Probably the only explanation is that at some point we had the panel standing on a wet floor for a long time. At the same time, that would explain the capillarity, the watermarks along the edge of the bottom edge.
Serracini was puzzled. Why was a valuable painting left standing on a wet floor for what was clearly a period of months, if not years? But then he spotted something even more perplexing. More bleaching along the crossbars that held the giant painting together. But there was something odd about the pattern of bleaching. Water had pooled in the crossbars, but there was no sign that it had run down the back of the painting. It all pointed to one shocking conclusion. At some stage in its history, one of the world's greatest Leonardos had been abandoned, face down, with water dripping onto its back.
It had to be face down. If water were coming from the top and the painting was face down, the water will sink in, so to speak, just around and below the crossbars. I was very puzzled. Why would you treat a painting like that? Why would you leave it exposed to rain, exposed on a wet floor, even face down? Since the very beginning, there were problems related to this painting.
Document research had helped him pinpoint the Battle of Anghiari. Perhaps it could explain what had happened to the Adoration. He started to explore what was known about the painting's history and discovered an intriguing tale. In 1481, the Augustinian monks of San Donato Escopido in Florence commissioned the 28-year-old Leonardo to paint a work to hang above the altar of their church. It would portray the Adoration of the Magi, a classic subject for an altarpiece in Renaissance Italy. Leonardo received no payment up front and soon had to ask the monks for money to buy painting materials. Then, less than a year later, he suddenly and mysteriously abandoned the painting, leaving it only part finished. He left Florence for Milan, where he would live and work for 18 years. The Augustinian monks eventually employed another Florentine painter, Filippino Lippi, to create their altarpiece. Why would Leonardo abandon the painting? And what happened to it next? Serracini delved deeper into the historical record and was amazed to find that in 1482, the Adoration simply disappears.
we have a black hole of 140 years. We know nothing about what happened to this painting. From the moment Leonardo walked out and left for Milano up to 1621, so practically 140 years later, when finally we have records that it was owned, was among the belongings of the Medici, we don't know what happened to it.
It looked likely that the damage to the painting occurred during this 140-year black hole. But why did such an accomplished work come to be treated like a worthless piece of junk? Saraceni started to wonder if he had bitten off more than he could chew. What had started as a straightforward assessment of the painting for restoration was becoming a full-blown forensic investigation of the painting's murky history. He started to probe the painting using ultraviolet and infrared light. When tuned to specific frequencies, these wavelengths can reveal an extraordinary level of detail about a painting's different layers. What this analysis revealed was something puzzling about the Adoration's layers of oil paint. The paint had been applied roughly and inexpertly. A far cry from the delicate brushwork for which Leonardo was renowned. And Saraceni was also surprised to find crudely blocked out areas of brown paint. It raised a disturbing possibility.
When I started imaging different wavelengths, when I went over the entire painting and I checked that this poor quality of painting was everywhere, it came almost immediately as a reaction to refuse the idea that this was done by Leonardo.
Saraceni was no stranger to controversy, but he knew that this was potential dynamite. Asked to investigate whether one of Leonardo's greatest works could stand up to a restoration, he now had doubts that it was painted by Leonardo at all.
This is not something you can speak up the moment you walk out of the Uffizi and say, well, I have a doubt about Leonardo. You have to, realize that this is an hypothesis that you better check carefully before you even think too loud.
Nobody had ever doubted that Leonardo painted the Adoration. Its composition bore the hallmarks of his genius, and it was backed by an impeccable pedigree. But until this moment, nobody had ever seen the brushwork in the incredible detail that Saraceni's equipment could reveal. Nonetheless, aware that his reputation was at stake, Saraceni decided he needed more evidence. He had no idea that the Adoration would have many more electrifying revelations in store before his work was complete.
I was there to establish the state of consummation of a great masterpiece, period. It's when I started to put the microscope on it that something clicked in my mind, or at least I started to be surprised.
Saraceni gained permission to remove minute samples, the size of a few grains of sand, from the Adoration's surface for the first time. He embedded the tiny cross-sections in resin and examined them microscopically to see what they might reveal about the painting's true history.
What do we know of Leonardo as a painter? Almost nothing. And I'm not referring to the hundreds and hundreds of books written by art historians. No. We know practically nothing. We start now to study Leonardo scientifically as an artist.
So how did Leonardo, or the mystery painter, create the Adoration? The microscopic analysis allowed Saraceni to reconstruct its creation. surface had been prepared with a layer of gesso. This mixture of whitener, glue, and water dries to a smooth white surface on which it is easy to draw. Next, a thin layer of glue as a base. Then he found traces of lampblack, soot mixed with resin. This was the underdrawing, the heart of the painting, where the artist laid the groundwork for its final composition. On top of this, Saracini found lead white, a sealing layer, that was transparent enough to leave the crucial underdrawing visible. Finally, layers of oil paint. But as more samples underwent his microscope, Saracini began to see something strange. In some parts of the painting, signs that the upper layer of lead white were missing.
What we found in these cross sections, it seems to confirm what we found on the back. That is the idea of the painting face down on a wet floor and the attempt to rub away or to clean up what was the result of this damage. And that's why we hardly see in many areas the priming layer, because it's gone.
The worn primer suggested that someone had tried to clean up the abandoned dirty painting. And there was more. On top of the layer of rubbed and smeared primer, thick crude traces of charcoal. Clear evidence of a second underdrawing. Saracini already had a hunch that somebody much less skillful than Leonardo had applied the surface layer of paint. Now he had clear evidence that the crucial original underdrawing had been crudely redrawn and repainted, probably by the same person. It seemed likely that the original underdrawing was by Leonardo, but the adoration as we know it was redrawn and painted by someone else.
This was a very strong evidence, suggesting that what we are looking at might have not been contemporary to Leonardo, might not have been the work of Leonardo. But the point was, did I have enough evidence to say this, or should I search for something stronger?
Saracini still had to rule out one remote possibility, that Leonardo had altered his own underdrawing and done the clumsy overpainting himself. He needed to establish how much time had elapsed between the original underpainted priming layer and the final overpainting. He decided to look for evidence of cracks in the underpainting. Since paint cracks over time, the degree of cracking could enable him to estimate this critical time lag. In sample after sample, the evidence was clear.
In some cross-sections, I could see how the color added on top of the priming layer was sinking inside the cracks, the aging cracks, into the priming layer.
Saracini had concluded that it was many years, or even decades, between the underdrawing being created, it cracking with age, and the layer of paint being added. There was no record of Leonardo returning later in life to add the paint to the Adoration underdrawing. And a much more convincing history of the Adoration of the Magi was starting to fall into place. Discarded and left face down for years, it was later subjected to a clumsy cleanup job. An anonymous, unskilled painter modified the original composition, altering the underdrawing, and roughly applying the top layer of paint. Saracini had built a compelling case. Is not the work of Leonardo da Vinci. Saracini knew that his thesis would come as a bombshell, and the art establishment might decide to shoot the messenger.
Let's face it, we are talking about the most important painting of Leonardo we have in Italy, an absolute icon in art history, the unfinished work by Leonardo by definition, as you can read in all books of art history. And here I am facing what could have been a totally different reality. That the painting as we see it today, the colors that we see today were not put up by Leonardo. I mean, it is enough to make you feel that you are facing the test of your life.
Saracini's theory made headlines around the world. It divided opinion among art historians. But as the fallout rumbled on, Saracini remained frustrated by two key unanswered questions. Why was the original Adoration abandoned and later repainted? And most important of all, was Leonardo's underdrawing, his original vision for the painting, intact beneath the layers of paint? Perhaps surprisingly, the Uffizi Gallery remained supportive of Saracini's work. They have once again permitted the bulletproof glass to be lifted from one of its most famous paintings. And 3 years after the initial revelation, decided to allow Saracini another chance to study the painting. Leonardo's original underdrawing unveiled for the first time.
La riflettografia all'infrarossi nella fattispecie, che è quella che più ha interessato me.
It was a restoration that envisaged the removal of the yellowing of the paints and the removal of everything that was dirt. This would have taken away the filth, insect droppings, and the dirt combined with people's breath. Therefore, we would have seen much more clearly, whilst leaving everything else as it was, the drawings or the brushstrokes of Leonardo.
Leggere compiutamente quello che la tavola esibiva.
Saracini prepares to start to uncover Leonardo's critical vision for the Adoration, as he first created it in 1481. His instrument of choice, an infrared camera fixed to a motorized scanner he engineered himself. It will capture thousands of detailed digital images of the underdrawing. It is a remarkable moment. From the gloomy images of the oil paintings, emerging for the first time in 500 years, Leonardo's original drawings of the Adoration.
It's like digging in archaeological terms and finding, in this case, wonderful drawings. It's exciting, at the same time, it's finally showing what I always thought, and that is all this has been repainted, and this is not the work of Leonardo. All this has been added on top.
Entirely new aspects of Leonardo's composition emerge. The face of a man.
Stop.
Where none could be seen in the painting.
Look here. This is the chin, the mouth, the nose, which has been covered by these brushstrokes of carbon, and this is the eye, and this is the forehead line. Now we're looking at this face here. We can see in much finer details the layout of the physiognomy of this face. I think you should come and see this one.
And something truly remarkable. Leonardo's alleged self-portrait, seen for the first time as a pristine drawing, looking just as it must have when he drew it at age 29.
Very often you see a work of art and you consider an icon, and as such you accept whatever is there as the original idea, good or bad or beautiful or ugly that might appear to you. And I think this was the case, especially on the most important painting by Leonardo we have in Italy. Stop. Right. Stop. Right.
Over a period of 2 weeks, Serracini captured almost 2,500 images of the underdrawing of the Adoration. At his lab, his team starts putting together a final mosaic of the Adoration into one giant image. But one early image the team recovered surprised Serracini. He decided to get the opinion of art historian Monsignor Timothy Verdon, a specialist in religious paintings of the Renaissance.
As you can see, the results are staggering because you actually see through the brownish paint that today is covering most of the painting. And just see even the expression of the faces, the emotion of their bodies.
Superb, very beautiful. That horse is astounding. So we're certainly looking at Leonardo. We're looking at an amazing new page of information about his early style. Here we are in 1481.
And all the motion that comes out.
Yes, and so one has the feeling that Leonardo must have the battle scene is amazing.
Serracini is keen to get Verdon's expert insight into one scene that seems very familiar. In the painting of the Adoration, two high-spirited horses skirmish. But in Leonardo's underdrawing, the same horses are clearly carrying men, enemy combatants locked in violent battle.
Yes, this is absolutely what he will try to do later for the Battle of Anghiari.
See the changes.
Look at that. That's astounding.
Remember this figure for the Battle of Anghiari drawing?
Yes.
It's an astonishing discovery, and one that links directly into Serracini's lifelong quest for the lost Battle of Anghiari. The painting, once dubbed the greatest masterpiece of the Renaissance, was particularly admired for the lifelike power and violence of its central battle scene, with its warriors clashing on horseback. The shared imagery between the two paintings is unmistakable, and to art historians, it's deeply significant. Anghiari was the work of a mature Leonardo at the peak of his powers. But Serracini's work has revealed that the young Leonardo was already rehearsing this great scene over 20 years before, in his very first major commission. To art historians, it was a fascinating new insight into the mind of the young Leonardo. But it started Serracini thinking, why would such a powerful scene be so dramatically altered?
I asked myself why that was done. Why someone would go and paint on top of such an incredibly beautiful drawing by Leonardo, doing such a poor job, with such a poor technique.
Was Leonardo's battle scene a crucial clue to the Adoration's checkered history? Could it help explain why the painting was abruptly abandoned and treated so badly? Serracini was forming a shocking hypothesis that Leonardo's great masterpiece may have fallen victim to an act of censorship.
I begin to wonder if this blacking out process, this radical editing of many details, perhaps for iconographical reasons, that is to say, out of a desire to change the meaning, the blacking out, say, of the battle scenes. We know that the church was often extremely sensitive, hypersensitive To find battle scenes in the background of an adoration of the Magi might simply have been like turning on the evening news. People didn't want to see this kind of imagery.
Could this be the final piece of the puzzle surrounding the adoration's history? Saraceni knew that Augustinian monks commissioned the adoration as an altarpiece. They no doubt expected Leonardo to provide a traditional rendering of the three wise men paying homage to Jesus. Instead, he delivered something revolutionary. The maelstrom of figures around the Christ child would be unsettling enough. The inclusion of a full-blown battle scene was unheard of. There is no record of the monk's response to Leonardo's initial drawing. All that's known is that he abandoned it before it was finished. Saraceni thought he knew why.
I could figure the friar saying, okay, we have this big panel, we cannot use it, we cannot put it on the main altar because it's not a painting we wanted, we will not accept it because of what the drawing shows. So we don't want to throw it away because Leonardo might come back. Just let's store it. Let's put it away in a storage room and let's leave it there.
It was a scenario that would make sense of Saraceni's discoveries. The young Leonardo abandons the adoration when the monks reject his radical underdrawing. His work is left to rot in a leaky storehouse. Many years later, when works by Leonardo start to bring a good price, it is retrieved and cleaned up. An unknown and unskilled artist turns the drawing into something more saleable, redrawing and painting over the most controversial imagery. The painting becomes an icon, but Leonardo's true vision for it lies hidden under layers of somebody else's paint. Saraceni knew that this scenario could never be scientifically proven. But his technology was now on the verge of revealing something much more valuable: the underdrawing itself. Saraceni retrieved 2,400 digital images of the adoration's original underdrawing. It was the first time this technology had been used on such a scale. Stitching them together into a giant mosaic took him and his team almost a year. Finally, it is ready to be unveiled. Beneath the clumsy overpainting, revealed for the first time, Leonardo's true vision of the adoration. Details not seen for over 500 years are now visible. In the background, the clash of warriors that Leonardo would recreate for the great lost battle of Anghiari. In the swirling crowd surrounding Jesus and the Madonna, almost 30 new figures. The Madonna's feet revealed resting on a boulder in a stream. Masons rebuilding a church, perhaps a symbol of the destroyed Temple of David. In the far distance, beyond the battling riders, there's even what appears to be a Leonardo joke or riddle: a lone elephant on the horizon. It's a treasure house of drawings, straight from the hand of Leonardo, that will keep art historians busy for decades. Saraceni flew to Los Angeles to show it to the man who set him on his journey as an art detective, his lifelong mentor and foremost Leonardo scholar, Carlo Pedretti. Saraceni is taking Pedretti to Los Angeles Cathedral. There he will see the complete underdrawing of the adoration as revealed by his protege. It's a moment tinged with anxiety.
See what
Pedretti is perhaps the only man in the world able to confirm that it is indisputably the handiwork of Leonardo.
Silence can be more eloquent than speech. Well, I feel very humble because it's really a privilege to get to see what Leonardo did, as if I was looking over his shoulders while he's doing it. It's just like seeing the thing as Leonardo did it, you know. If there is one thing that I'm comfortable in attribution is a Leonardo drawing. There's no problem whatsoever. It's just like reading a manuscript page. I mean, this is Leonardo.
Its underdrawing reveals that even this early in his career, Leonardo was already a revolutionary artist. And to Pedretti, it is further evidence of Leonardo's genius for capturing life in all its energy and motion, in an almost contemporary way.
Well, here we are in Los Angeles looking something, you know, that prefigures cinematography. I mean, it's caught in the action. It's just like a segment in a movie thing, actually, yeah. And your imagination, I mean, it triggers your imagination to see the next step. Total freedom. Look at this job here. Well, we have a glimpse into what might and hopefully will be the future of the study of Leonardo. All these top scholars and authorities that were a little hesitant at the beginning, they are fully convinced. I mean, it's not a matter of being convinced by an argument, but by a fact. And that's a fact.
Pedretti believes that Serracini's work has produced material of immense value to art historians. But they both knew that winning over a skeptical art establishment back home in Italy could prove a much bigger challenge. Then, at the end of last year, Serracini received a bolt from the blue. The Uffizi Gallery in Florence announced a major new exhibition of Leonardo's work that will travel all around the world. And they wanted to feature Serracini's work on the Adoration. The exhibition's official launch was a big event. It was attended by the heads of major galleries, the superintendents of culture, even government ministers. Also present, Leonardo experts from all over the world involved in curating the exhibition. At last, Serracini received the recognition that he had craved for so long.
Maurizio New Images are just sensationally good. We had some idea what infrared could do before, and we'd seen some of these, but the old images were a bit ghostly, and what the Maurizio's images do, they let us, in a sense, see the drawing, and we could see the quality of it. It's not just that we can see where the lines were, but we really get a sense of how Leonardo was drawing on the panel.
Leonardo finally can be seen for what he has left us. We are now able to see his masterpiece. Up to now, we were looking at an icon, but not to the Leonardo masterpiece of the Adoration.
The exhibition celebrates Leonardo's skills as an engineer, anatomist, and mathematician. It culminates in the Leonardo Gallery, the holy of the holies in Renaissance art. Its centerpiece is the Adoration of the Magi.
I had the chance to place my work next to a work of Leonardo, and that is, for me, is a great achievement, personal and professional achievement.
In a room next door, a a special exhibit on Serracini's work, the vindication of a lifetime struggle.
I'm very satisfied. I felt honored that I had my work placed in the Uffizi. It meant to have my work recognized, accepted.
Serracini's work on the Adoration has powerfully demonstrated how science can complement the study of great artworks.
If we really look into it, and obviously the new infrared imagery helps this, we can see it's a crucible of invention. What Maurizio Serracini is a master of is producing radically new insights. It was the first time we can go back to see what the painter is doing earlier in the work. So we're in a sense not able quite to watch the work evolving, but we're almost able to go into the studio at an earlier stage and sort of see some of the secrets which are going on underneath.
But Serracini's success is bittersweet. Right at the heart of the Adoration is a reminder of his great unfinished quest, the search for Leonardo's great lost masterpiece.
I've been struggling so many years to search for the Bell of Anghiari, and here I am facing the initial idea of the Bell of Anghiari in the Adoration. Wonderful drawing, wonderful composition. Now I feel even more motivated. I want to go and find it in the Holy 500.
Serracini is determined to return to the Great Hall of the Palazzo Vecchio to complete his lifelong quest. And his success with the Adoration may yet open doors. His theory that the Battle of Anghiari lies in a secret void behind the fresco on the east wall remains controversial, but the Palazzo Vecchio authorities have invited him to join a committee to discuss the way forward. He is even exploring new technology that could sense the presence of paint inside the gap. If it produces evidence that the painting is there, the entire Vasari fresco could be safely removed. A discovery on the scale and importance of the Battle of Anghiari would be the find of the century. Whether he ever does get the chance to gaze on Anghiari, one thing is certain. He will never back down from controversy. The art detective already has a new case in his sights, and he has a hunch that one of Leonardo's most celebrated women is not all she seems.